Guys, welcome again to my YouTube channel. I am the same Dr. Francisca or Dr. Amaka. So today, the topic of discussion today is on humility and self-esteem. Now, why the choice of this topic? I realize these days that there's a lot of misconception around humility. So when I say misconception, I mean there are some actions that I have seen and are labeled humility, which to me, absolutely, that is not what humility is. And because I've seen repeatedly all these things and they are labeled humility, I decided I picked it. I had this motivation to discuss this, what humility is exactly. So to start this particular video, I'd like to define humility based on what Google said. And here is what it is. Humility is the character trait of having a modest, accurate view of oneself. So, a modest, accurate view of who you truly are. That's what that means. A modest, accurate view of yourself, free from arrogance. It involves recognizing one's limitations, being receptive to feedback, and treating others with sincere respect rather than focusing solely on personal ego. Then he went further to say, I just want to highlight these things. The core components of humility: accuracy over arrogance. It is not about thinking poorly of yourself. Rather, it is having the self-awareness to accept both your strengths and flaws without needing to boast. That's the first one. Let me just expatiate on this. Humility is not, for example, let me typify myself. I am a medical doctor, for example, and I decided to denounce being a doctor and then go to accept another role so that others will see me as a humble person. That's not what it is. That's not what humility is. Humility is that as I am, I appreciate what my strengths are. I appreciate that I am very good with this doctor thing. For example, I appreciate that I have weaknesses. I have places that I need to learn more. I have flaws as well. That is what a humility actually is. Identifying your true strengths and your weaknesses. Not assuming a role or positions below what you are. That's not what it is. Because that's often what I see a lot of people define humility as. So he went further to say willingness to learn. It keeps the mind open, allowing you to admit mistakes, learn from others, and surrender personal biases to seek the truth. And it says it is not the opposite of confidence. Arrogance, not confidence, is the opposite of humility. Humility provides the inner security to lead or collaborate without feeling threatened by the skills of others. You see what humility is? Let me use the healthcare system as an example where, for example, different professionals come together, and work together for the betterment of the patients. In the job, in that healthcare sector, there are job roles. Every cadre has their own designated job roles. Let me give an example. It is the role of a medical doctor, if a patient presents to the hospital, for example, to assess and write out a management plan, bring out a management plan for that patient. And such management plans might involve other sectors of the healthcare to execute for the betterment of that patient. Humility is not, for example, when I come, instead of assuming my role as the doctor, I am going to assess and write a management plan for a patient. I decide to know, let me go and assume the role of a HCA. So who is going to play the doctor role? I have seen oftentimes humility is seen as accepting like positions far below you. That's what they term humility. So I have read out exactly what Google is saying humility is. And the explanation for that is, as a person, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? I know I have strength in this. For example, I know I have my weaknesses in this. For example, I often say of myself, I know that if I decide to do something, if I pick interest in anything, I come out, I put in my best for it. And you might see me coming out as one of the best of that thing. And you think it's, I told lies from the beginning. So whatever I have interest in, I bring, as in I tend to come out like best of that thing, if you understand where I'm coming from. So what about my weaknesses? I know what my weaknesses are. You understand? And for example, if there are things I need to work on, for example, I'm willing to work on them. Are there places I don't know some things? Am I willing to learn what I don't know? That's what humility, that's what this definition is saying. So humility is not when you assume a role below you. That's what I often see. You understand? Or have a low self-esteem. That's not what humility is. Yeah? So I went further as well to bring out from Google what self-esteem is. What actually self-esteem. Most times you encourage one has a healthy self-esteem, a positive self-esteem. You understand? Having a low self-esteem is not also the best. But that's sometimes there are circumstances you might pass through that will affect your self-esteem. And where you should identify with healthy self-esteem, you find out that you're having a very poor, unhealthy self-esteem. So what exactly is self-esteem? From Google as well. Self-esteem is your overall subjective sense of personal worth and value. It encompasses how you think and feel about yourself, your confidence in your abilities, and how much you value yourself as a person. It heavily influences your motivation, well-being, and daily decision making. So this topic is coming from me, who has actually been through a lot, who has, knowing my potentials, who has almost been robbed off as in a lot of people around me will think I am not able to do this. So this is coming from me. There's one of my YouTube videos I made on knowing yourself. You understand? Knowing who you are and working on your potentials. You know yourself, not what another person defines you as. Even those very close to you might not actually know your potentials. You understand? So this definition of self-esteem, I love it so much. It heavily influences your motivation, and it is true. You understand? For example, there are so many doctors who graduated and they are fine at the level of just having their MBBS, their primary degree. They are not interested in specialization. You understand? Your self-esteem, who you are, the esteem you have for yourself, might motivate your daily decision making. So I am one of those exceptions that insist on a postgraduate training that I must further to get to the peak of the profession. But I know it's not everybody that has the same thoughts and belief. You understand? Your self-esteem motivates you, decision making, and you decide to, for example, study further. I want to do this, and then another person next to you is saying, I'm not able to do it. I made a video saying, talking about comparing, as in how to merge your career life with, for example, family life. If you have like your kids, around your kids, that's usually one of the major challenges of a lot of women, especially in the Western nation. You understand? But I often say that, is it possible for you to achieve that, the height of your career dreams, as well as having positive influence on, for example, your kids and all that? I said yes. In places where you need a minder, you get a minder. What are your potentials? When I see some women, for example, I often like to challenge them around this career life. A lot of women have ignored, forgotten their career life because they claim raising their kids interrupted. Especially in the Western nation, for example, you have options of going for part-time in jobs. So that option can be explored. The WHO's definition of health, it emphasizes on complete physical, mental. So every aspect of your life has to be healthy. That's what WHO defines health as. You understand? But you know, it's common when you come to anybody and like ask the person, how are you today? And the person says, I'm fine. But what health actually is when you have a balance. And is it possible to have that balance? Yes. But you need to work on it. You need to be determined. You need to work on it and apply things that are very practical to achieving that. So why did I bring up this topic? Next time when one tells you, go and take the job of this, that's just be humble. Identify what humility is. Humility is not reducing your self-worth. That's not what humility is. You know, next time when a person tells you, take a role below you or take a position below you as a humble person, I'm not saying you cannot do that. I'm not saying you cannot decide to, for example, decide to go and work as as a HCA. If, for example, you are a doctor, you understand. But assuming, don't always see it as in assuming roles below you. Reducing yourself is what humility is. That's not what humility is. And I've read exactly what Google defines humility as. It's your ability to identify what your strengths are. I know I have strength here. I know I'm very good with this thing. I know I'm very good with, for example, cooking. I know I'm very good with that. I know I'm very good with, I know I'm an organizer. I know I'm this. I know I'm that. That is what humility is. Identifying your true strengths and actually your weaknesses. So I will wrap this video up with giving a story of, there's this person I know very well who, because of the desires of her parents, she went to study medicine. So she has a lot of qualities in her. She's one that likes, this planning thing, like this wedding planning, different types of planning. She likes to fit into those things. But her parents desire she study medicine. And yes, she went into study medicine, and she had a lot of challenges. She had, it wasn't so smooth for her to have studied medicine. There were so many challenges. Of course, medicine is tedious in itself, actually. So there were so many challenges she had, and she dragged all through. And finally, yes, she graduated. She did graduate from medical school, finally. After some failures and all that, she finally graduated. But guess what? She never practiced, she didn't go into practice that. She still went into the event planning she loves to do. So I'm that kind of person that believes in, one, identifying his strength. In the kids I bore, in the daughters I bore, my 3 daughters, Kayla, Kendra, and Cassandra, even as they are, as at the time I was with them, I knew their potentials, each of them. So that is one thing I love about anybody around me. Identify your strengths, not what one defines you as, who you truly are. Identify what your strengths are. Identify your potentials. And I'm that kind of person that will always say, allow anybody to get to the best of his potentials. I hate when potentials are halted. I hate it. Let that person get to the best of his or her potentials. Yeah? So that is it. There's a lot of misconception around humility. Don't always mix humility for having a low self-esteem. Yeah? So thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Share as much as you can. Share the video. Subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. Until my next video, it's still me, Dr. Amaka, Dr. Francisca. Oh.